If you're watching on the camera now, you see this finely dressed individual sitting across from me, chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, Mr. Mike Hurst, former U.S. attorney here in the Southern District. Mike, how's it going this morning?
Good morning, Clay. How are you doing, man?
Man, I am doing good. It is a special election Tuesday here in Central Mississippi. Your headphones good? You good? No?
There we go.
Okay, cool. So it's a special election Tuesday. We got a chance to take a Supreme Court seat. I mean, I know it's a nonpartisan race,
Yeah,
but I think
everything in life is, right? Nonpartisan.
Yeah, 100%. I got out and absentee voted, as I am out of town here today in Florida, Mississippi, from Brandon, 3 towns over. That's out of town.
Oh, look, I drove over this morning. It's way out of town.
From downtown Brandon to here, it is a road trip.
Yeah,
it is indeed a road trip. But man, first off, I don't know why we don't have early voting. Hopefully we'll get that situated here in the next session, or at least by the next round of statewide elections. But with all that said, I got out, I absentee voted, and there was a big turnout in Rankin County.
Yep.
I think was it Tuesday of last week? I think through Thursday, through close of business Thursday at Rankin County, I was told like 2,500 people that got out and voted. I mean, just for, to compare that, only a little over 3,000 voted in the last mayor's race over there in Brandon. Now, granted, I know it's the whole county versus just Brandon, but still, I think that's for a special election.
Right.
I thought that was big.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, everybody needs to be reminded we have a runoff election today here in the central part of the state in the Mississippi Supreme Court. And as you said, having those early votes being cast is huge. And I think I looked at the numbers yesterday for Rankin County. I think we were up to 3,000 already for Rankin County. Now, absentee ballot ended Saturday, but today is the big day. Today is election day. Man, I would encourage all your listeners to get out and vote. As you said, we have a huge opportunity to make our Supreme Court more responsive to the will of the people, to make sure that we have justices on the court who actually follow the Constitution, the state Constitution, follow the laws enacted by the legislature, and not just make up stuff that we've seen over the last few years of this particular Supreme Court justice that we're trying to get voted out of office.
Do you have some examples of that?
Yeah, one example that I think will resonate, especially with you and your listeners, Clay, is that when the legislature tried to create the Capitol Complex District Courts, Justice Jim Kitchens on the Mississippi Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional to create those inferior courts. Now, the Supreme Court itself said, it was unconstitutional for the Supreme Court Chief Justice to put in place these unelected judges. But they said the legislature has authority to create inferior courts, but Justice Kitchens says no. In this case, they did not have that authority. And so he was an impediment to trying to create additional courts in the city of Jackson to try to address the unlawfulness, the illegality, all the crime that is being committed in Jackson inside the new Capitol Complex District. For the life of me, having been the U.S. attorney, the chief federal law enforcement officer over half of our state, including Jackson, having been just a line federal prosecutor for almost a decade, I just can't understand why people don't want Jackson to improve. Like, I can't understand why they don't want crimes and our laws to be enforced, crimes to be prosecuted in Jackson. And for Justice Kitchens to say that the legislature doesn't have the authority to create new courts when the legislature has clearly done that in the past. I mean, the Mississippi Court of Appeals was created by the legislature. Municipal courts were created by the legislature. So I think that's one thing that will especially resonate with your listeners is that, here's the legislature trying to come up with creative solutions to address crime, and we have someone on the Supreme Court that's an impediment to that.
With my radio show here, I get a chance to speak to a lot of different people, a lot of different walks of life, races, the whole 9 yards. And one thing that I haven't been able to actually run across is somebody who doesn't want to say for Jackson.
Right.
Now, I know the media, sometimes I say the media, the mainstream media, sometimes you have people online, I swear they have to be paid, but they find these people who say these things are racist. But man, I get plenty of black callers that call in, thank me for what we do here,
right,
kind of being a voice, and B, all supported HB 1020,
right,
in every aspect of it.
Right.
Like, why is this racist? It's almost racist to suggest it's racist because you're kind of automatically suggesting who would be committing the crime, in my opinion. But
in my experience is there are two kind of tracks. There's one track where what you just said, which is everybody's in favor of a safer Jackson.
Sure.
When they speak. But the second track is some of the politicians and some of the elected officials in Jackson. I've seen it as the U.S. attorney. They talk a good line. They say we want to save for Jackson. We need to enforce laws, but then their actions don't back up their talk.
And that's 100% true.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the perfect example of that is, when we first started Project Eject, our violent crime initiative in Jackson, when I became U.S. attorney in 2017, we had all the support, all the input of JPD, the mayor, everything, and we were breaking records in terms of the prosecutions we were bringing to violent crime in Jackson, and we did that the first probably 2.5 years I was U.S. attorney. But as we started doing that, and actually violent crime started falling in the city of Jackson. It's not really talked about much, but we have documented statistics showing violent crime falling in the city of Jackson those first couple of years. But then I don't know if the mayor didn't like what we were doing. He was getting pushed back from the extreme left and his constituency in Harlem or Detroit or Miami, where he visits now. For whatever reason, he started pulling back JPD. And despite the men and women on the ground at JPD who wanted to do this, who loved doing this, who loved enforcing the law and doing their jobs, their leadership really started pulling back, and we started getting less participation. The perfect example of this is in 2020, the last year I was U.S. attorney. We were prosecuting all carjackings. We said, if you have a carjacking in Jackson, we will prosecute it. It's a federal crime. We will prosecute it. And we had been doing that for the last 2.5 years. In 2020, mid-year in July of 2020, it was reported to me that Jackson had approximately 54 carjackings in the first 6 months of 2020. Wow. 0 of those cases had been brought to our office to prosecute. That's what I'm talking about, pulling back. You got politicians saying we want to save for Jackson, but then you don't have the actions to back that up.
Right. But you let an officer be within a football field of a man dying, and they're going to send them to jail.
Yeah. That's right. But back to Kitchens. I mean, the two things that I think really resonated with me when I started digging into this election and this campaign was, one, he has been endorsed by the Southern Poverty Law Center, who you may recall was the employer of our good district attorney, Jody Owens, and has done a lot of really bad things out there, like calling the American Family Association a terrorist group.
They called Moms for Liberty a terrorist group too.
Yes,
I have called them in the Clay Edwards realm. They're a terrorist group.
Yeah, so that group, the Southern Poverty Law Center, has endorsed Jim Kitchen. The second thing that I think, especially we as constitutional conservatives need to know, is the Honorable Congressman Benny Thompson has endorsed Jim Kitchens. Now, your listeners may recall that Benny Thompson is the one who employed the staffer that encouraged the shooter, the assassin of President Trump, to practice more and not miss next time. Yep. He's the same congressman that introduced legislation, said we need to take Secret Service protection away from President Donald Trump. He's the same congressman that instituted the January 6th commission or committee to investigate all this stuff and to do it in a partisan way to try to implicate Republicans in Donald Trump. That's the same congressman who has endorsed Jim Kitchens for the Mississippi Supreme Court.
Say no more.
I mean, to me, that alone, those two endorsements alone shows that we do not need this man on the Mississippi Supreme Court. He was first elected to office before you and I were born.
Yep.
1971. And if he gets reelected, the listeners need to know this is an 8-year term. And if he gets reelected, he's going to be almost 90 years old. He and Joe Biden are practically the same age, and we don't need that on our Mississippi Supreme Court.
I got a mailer in the other day, and I posted it to my Facebook, but I'm just going to read it, folks. On one side, it's like, Jennifer Branning voted against equal pay for equal work. If Jennifer Branning didn't look out for us in the Senate, why would she look out for us on the Supreme Court? And then on the flip side, it's got a young family here, and it says, Justice Jim Kitchens gets it, blah, blah, blah. But the thing that I thought was interesting, A, it doesn't show his 81-year-old butt on here anywhere. And B, it was paid for. And if this doesn't sound like a 1800s dog whistle, I don't know what does. The new Southern majority.
Oh wow.
That for a group that likes to call everybody racist, that sounds very right. The new Southern majority.
Yeah.
When I think Dixiecrat, I think new Southern majority.
Oh,
I don't know who they are, what pack they are, or whatever, but it sounds terrible.
No, it sounds terrible, and for them not to really, say who they are, but do that is kind of that shows you exactly all you need to know. The third thing I will say about Jim Kitchens is, your listeners may have heard of this internet, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like a blog. It's called Mississippi Today. It writes some news articles, I think.
It's a little it's a little Democrat fanzine, I think.
Even Mississippi Today, as liberal leaning as they have specifically referred to Jim Kitchens as one of two, quote, reliable liberals, close quote, on the Mississippi Supreme Court. Yeah. Again, that's the Mississippi Today calling Jim Kitchens a, quote, reliable liberal. Again, I think our listeners need to know this is not nonpartisan. I mean, everything we do, people are always like, well, I don't vote labels. I don't vote parties. Well, if you vote for or against someone based upon what they believe, you're voting on principle. You're voting, and all the parties are a collection of those principles. And so we, as the Mississippi Republican Party, we looked at both candidates and we decided Jennifer Branning is the one who reflects our principles, reflects our values, and that's the one that we think Mississippians should support in the Mississippi Supreme Court race.
I have no problem with the parties getting behind a candidate. I mean, look, it would be sticking your head in the sand and pretending that she's not already a member of the party.
That's right.
I mean, let's not play that game.
No, I know.
And
it's kind of childish to play those games, honestly.
It really is. We're all adults.
That's right.
We've been begging for the adults to get back in the room. We're here now. So let's break the fourth wall, as they say in TV. Let's acknowledge she's a conservative,
right? And
let's move on about it. I mean, I see there's people on radio here that have complained about her getting money and raising money. Well, you gotta raise money to win.
Yeah,
you have to. That's just he raised money from the trial attorneys, that's my understanding.
Well, not just the trial attorneys. I mean, huge amounts. Most of his money has come from trial attorneys, but trial attorneys outside the state of Mississippi. So, Clay, why would trial attorneys outside the state of Mississippi be supporting a Mississippi Supreme Court justice?
Hoping to get some things passed that don't benefit Mississippians.
Maybe. Or maybe hoping to file some lawsuits and, get to the Supreme Court and have huge paydays, huge payouts. I think when you look at individuals running for office, you need to look at where those campaign contributions come from. And when someone has that much money coming from out of state, you really need to question, what's behind that.
Well, we often refer to, out of state dark money, when it comes to stuff like the initiative process and all that. It's one of the reasons why the initiative process hasn't been brought back, because they're worried about dark money coming in and maybe getting abortion passed and some other things, marijuana, recreational marijuana, some other stuff. So it's all things you got to watch out for if you're against those things.
Right. That's right.
All right, let's take our first break. We've got Chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, Mr. Mike Hurst, in here. I'm going to see if I can shake Mike down and have a good conversation, get some Jackson stories out of him from his time as U.S. Attorney here in the Southern District. This is the Clay Edwards Show. We will be right back on 103.9 FM, WYAB. If you guys want to chime in this morning, the Guns and Gear text line is 769-241-1944. If you got any questions from Mike, if you're watching online, drop your questions in the comments and we'll try to get those answered as well. The Mazda of Jackson phone line, 601-879-0002. We'll be right back. All right, I got Mike Hurst here in the studio. Mike, I've got to know you a little bit over the last year or so, and we've done a couple of these and been at some functions and events and stuff. And I knew who you were from your time as U.S. Attorney, seeing you on the news and all that when I was just a guy that talked crap on the internet and still am, but I've expanded that.
Yeah.
And I was always a fan of what you were doing, and being a lifelong Jacksonian, I really appreciated what you were doing. And now you're in your new role as chairman of the Mississippi GOP or Mississippi Republican Party, whatever folks want to call it. I was at one of your meetings the other day when it was like your first yearly executive meeting. I forget the technical name for the meeting, but and you talked about something that it got me fired up, and it was like kind of this grassroots thing about getting back into the communities, the smaller communities, not forgetting those, and don't forget that fight never ends. And fellow that just ran for governor here in Mississippi, Brandon Presley's gotten a lot of money. Got a lot of money from the Democrats to come in, and they're trying to flip some of these municipalities blue.
Yep.
And what can we do to kind of fight that fight and help prevent that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. What most of my friends and family, we all naturally focus on the presidential election. I mean, that's huge. It gets all the attention. It gets the national news. But honestly, I mean, what we have to remember is that the things that probably most affect our lives are what happens right outside our back door with our mayoral elections, our city, council elections, board of supervisor elections, and next year we have. I know this is we're 3 weeks away from the presidential election, but next year we have our municipal elections here in Mississippi, and it might not be on a lot of people's radar, but I can tell you it is on the Democrats' radar. And Brandon Presley, as you mentioned, who ran for governor against our governor Tate Reeves in 23. Raised a lot of money from outside groups. I want to say like almost 85% of his money came from outside the state of Mississippi. But he is also using some of that money and getting more money to create a political action committee to try to go after these municipal elections. And again, it's kind of a sleeper strategy, which is smart, which is brilliant. But we as conservatives have to wake up and we have to see what they're doing. The DNC raised so much money for Kamala Harris's campaign, over $1 billion, I think is what has been reported.
What they spent was over $1 billion.
Yeah, well, that's right. And so the Democrats are already funneling some of that money back to Mississippi. I read a news article a couple of weeks ago about the Mississippi Democratic Party had received $300,000 from the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, just to do communications strategy. And so you will see a lot of their, social media, a lot of their press releases all have picked up over the last few months because of this influx of money. And you can expect that's what we're going to see over the next 6 months as we prepare for municipal elections. And Presley's already been, he's been transparent and saying this is what he's doing and this is what he's going after. He specifically referenced the city of Gulfport as a perfect example. He said, right now, Billy Hughes, a Republican, is the mayor of Gulfport, but Brandon Presley actually won the city of Gulfport 56-44 when he ran for governor. And so that's something that we as conservatives, again, should be waking up to, that we can't take for granted just because we have a Republican mayor in office. We can't take for granted that that city or that municipality is going to elect another Republican. We've got to get off our couches, get off our butts, and get to work. And it's going to be a lot of work over the next 6 months.
And anybody who thinks that that the Democrats won't continue to pursue that, look at what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi. There is no low enough that these people look at and say, okay, enough's enough.
Yep.
They're like, I want more of it. I want everybody to bathe and marinate in my misery.
Yep.
And they want to expand that throughout the state. And we got to get up. We got to fight. We've got to get better at raising money. One thing I would give the Democrats is they're smart strategically. Strategically,
right.
They're smart. They make a lot of bad decisions. But B, they raise money, and it's like this blue team. That's what they tried with Kamala, I think. They thought Team Blue was big enough that it was blue no matter who.
Right.
And we're going to win this thing. We're just going to bulldoze our way through. And thankfully, Americans saw it through that.
Right.
And got out and voted, especially our women and our black and brown brothers and sisters who got out there and helped see through it a little bit and, saved America.
Yeah, that's one of the most encouraging things I've seen, that this generation coming up is not the generations of the past. And what I mean by that is they don't see race like maybe our forefathers saw race. They see results. They see going to the grocery store and their bills going up. They see going to the gas pump and their prices going up. They see that finally, the Republican Party is delivering. And the Democratic parties have been promising and promising and promising for decades and have not delivered. And they're kind of waking up to that, which is exciting. But one thing that I've found in being chairman of the Republican Party over the last 6 months is it's almost like we as Republicans, or we as a party, have been a victim of our own success. And what I mean by that is we've got every statewide elected office is Republican. We've got a supermajority in the House and the Senate are Republican. But we also have to have this apparatus called the Mississippi Republican Party to do the old school blocking and tackling of Republican politics. And what I mean by that is, making phone calls, doing the phone banks, going door to door, doing the traditional get out the vote efforts. Those things individual candidates can do, but we as a party are necessary in order to facilitate, coordinate, and make sure that gets done. Because again, we've got municipal elections next year. Obviously, we're going to have Republican candidates in all those races. But at the same time, we need a cohesive, holistic strategy to try to help all of those individuals and not just have an individual, one-off, if you will.
So obviously it comes down to raising money.
Sadly, it always comes back to money. You can't do TV ads, you can't do radio ads, you can't help with helping volunteers offset their cost of what they're doing. It all comes back to money, and we as a party, we have to raise money in order to do this. Signs are not free. Advertising is not free. In order to get the word out, we have to raise money.
Now, if I remember correctly, you were talking about y'all have a system in place where people can commit like $5 a month, $10 a month on a recurring type deal. How can they go sign up, and how can people get into even whether it's a small monthly commitment or a one-time commitment, a large monthly, whatever? How can people commit?
Yeah, and thank you. That's a great question. If you go to msgop.org, msgop.org, when you pull up our website, it'll pop up an opportunity for you to get involved in what we call it the United Republican Fund. And this was something that was set out decades ago, but basically it allows an individual to sign up to have a recurring monthly a donation to the Mississippi Republican Party. And all that does is allows us to have a revenue stream that we can afford staff, that we can pay for all those things I talked about without us having to do fundraisers every now and then. That's something that gives us some certainty as we try to plan, as we try to go forward in educating, empowering, and electing Republicans throughout the state of Mississippi. So yeah, go to msgop.org, click on United Republican Fund, and sign up to help us keep Mississippi red.
And all that money stays in Mississippi.
All that money stays in Mississippi. Absolutely.
I like it. Let's take a break. We got Mike Hurst, chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party, here in the studio with us. It is a special election Tuesday. We're here to remind everybody, get out and go vote here in Central Mississippi. We got a chance to flip a Supreme Court seat to a conservative. We need to take advantage of that as this opportunity presents itself, because it won't happen again for 8 years unless there ends up having to be a special election for some sort with Mr. Kitchens. So he is 81 years old, so you never know. Anyhow, this is the Clay Edwards Show. We'll be right back. All right, we got Mike Hurst here in the studio. Mike, I did have a question here in the chat. I think it was from Mike, possibly. Yeah, from Adam. He says, Mike, can Trump fire every U.S. attorney on day one?
Yes.
Yep, just that simple. Hopefully there's some that he will. I will say that, man, we're excited to get Trump in. I think we try to simmer expectations a little, because it's like the last 4 years we've taken a beating.
Yeah.
I don't expect complete wonders on day one, but there's a few.
Well, the speed in which he is nominating people, the quality of his nominations are just incredible. I know a lot of these individuals, and they are going to do a fantastic job. Pam Bondi is going to be a great Attorney General of the United States. Probably what I'm most excited about is Vivek and Elon being in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency.
Oosh.
I mean, that has the potential, and with those two at the helm, really, and this is not hyperbole, to transform our country, and transform our lives for the better. I mean, when you start getting, some of these stories, especially the story about the Supreme Court case that just overturned what's known as Chevron deference. Basically, it just means the courts would give deference to bureaucrats and administrative agencies on decisions they made. When
these state agencies, not state, but federal or state agencies, like Mississippi Department of Environmental Quality, for example, I guess they can't create laws as unelected officials.
Right. But when the Supreme Court threw that out, the story behind that was basically fishermen going out and fishing. One of the federal agencies decided, we're not only going to put monitors on your boat to make sure you're following federal law, we're going to make you, the fisherman, pay for that monitor. That was the fact pattern that brought down that whole bureaucracy of courts giving deference to administrative agencies. So, what Elon and Vivek are talking about, just completely taking a chainsaw to the federal bureaucracy, I can't even imagine how good that's going to be for us as Americans to get rid of that red tape and to get rid of that, the nanny state, frankly. So
I'm very excited, and I'm sure you, being a former federal employee for as long as you were, has had to deal with all that.
Oh man,
it's amazing anything gets done.
We had this term inside the federal bureaucracy. It's called RIP, retired in place, and you had some. Look, almost all of the individuals I worked with in the U.S. Attorney's Office when I was just a federal employee were good, decent, hard-working individuals. But as in every organization, you had some individuals who were what we called retired in place, and that means they collected a check. They did the least possible, the minimal they could get by, and because they're federal employees, they're the closest thing to immortality we have on this earth. You can't get rid of them. You can't fire them. So to do more of that and to get more efficiency, I tell people all the time, can you imagine if Chick-fil-A ran the federal government?
Oh yeah.
I mean, the service,
again.
thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, that would be incredible, but that's not what we have. But I'm excited about Elon and Vivek taking over that role.
Hey, we got another question here.
Yeah.
I think this is an important one. I wasn't going to do another one, but Matthew Gibson is watching on YouTube, and he says, how to join the GOP in Mississippi ? And he says, and why haven't the Republican Party reached out to black men in the state? I think it is an untapped Democrat that the state GOP has not. He thinks it's an untapped resource.
Yeah,
and I would say that I know for a fact that Rance and them have been down to JSU and set up down there, and they have been trying, at least on the college campuses anyway.
Well, I'm encouraged because, like you said, Jackson State University invited us, the party, to come down, and we went down. I think I was out of town that day, but our staff went down and participated in kind of a campaign event at JSU. A professor at JSU has been reaching out to us, and proxies of the MSGOP have been participating in, debates and other things at JSU. A number of years ago, my predecessor, Frank Bordeaux, the chairman before me, started an initiative to increase minority participation. And Rodney Hall, a new state representative from DeSoto County, African-American Republican, has been put in charge of that. And we've got a small but mighty force of those who are trying to expand that minority outreach. And I think over the next few months, you're going to see more of that from the Mississippi Republican Party.
And we just had a big flip here in the state. Now, he's not an elected official currently. I've got his name right here. I do apologize for not remembering off the top of my head. We just had a big flip from a Democrat, Shawaski Young, flipped over from the Democrat Party to Republican. Wrote a nice an op-ed about doing it.
Yeah, it was a good op-ed. I haven't spoken with Mr. Young yet. I think we will, obviously. But, if you go back and read that op-ed, I think he is saying a lot of what Democrats are saying right now, which is like, we didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left us. They're not the party of the working man. They're not the party of a small government. They're not the party of everything that maybe your parents or your grandparents thought they were the party of. The Republicans are the ones who are delivering small government. They're delivering, for the working man again. And I think you're going to see a lot more minorities come over to the Republican Party.
And not to bring faith and whatnot into it, but I do think that is a big thing in the black community is the church. Mm-hmm. It is the faith. It was coming up in Big Mama's house and going to church every Sunday. And you grew up like that, but then you got this party that represents everything but that. And I think a lot of people in the black community are seeing that, because the black people that I grew up around, I was always the minority. And my friends said, I stayed in Jackson until 3 years ago, always the minority. And the black people I grew up around were very, very faith driven. And I just as an American citizen, seeing what's going on with the Democrat Party, I was like, guys, they don't represent y'all anymore at all.
Yeah.
And I do believe that politics should stay out of faith and faith should stay out of politics. When politics decides to get into the church business, I don't have the problem with the church fighting back. Mm-hmm. But seeing that was part of his op-ed was his faith.
Oh, absolutely.
And family and, the nuclear family and what it represents. I feel like the Democrat Party did not represent the nuclear family anymore.
No, I think
it was a really good piece.
Yeah, no, it was a good piece. And I think all those things are exactly right. For whatever reason, the National Democratic Party has just become unmoored to any type of faith or any type of, frankly, common sense. I mean, that was the thing that really resonated with me at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee in July was, this little placard, this little sign they handed out to wave. It says, "Bring back common sense." I mean, how simple, but how prophetic is that, Clay? I mean, just common sense. That's all we're asking for. We're not, as Americans, we're not asking for a whole heck of a lot, just common sense.
Can we promote on meritocracy?
Right. Yeah, I love. There's a clip online of an African American pastor who talks about, we have Democrats want diversity in everything, except in our sports. We're not promoting diversity, equity, inclusion on our sports teams. I would go so far as, are you asking for a DEI hire when you go in for brain surgery? Are you asking for a DEI hire when you take off on a plane? I mean, when it comes to life, death decisions and our sports, we don't look at DEI hires.
It made national news yesterday that Walmart is moving away from and trimming back their DEI stuff. I was shocked to see a mega global corporation like Walmart publicly announce that. I would think you would just kind of trim the fat a little and go on about your business, but they actually made an announcement that they were not abandoning it completely, but shedding a lot of it.
Well, I think you probably will see a lot more of that over the coming weeks after Trump has been elected, after you see the mandate that he's gotten, after you see the fact that the American people are just fed up with all this nonsense. And I think you'll see people coming back and corporations coming back to their senses and getting rid of this whole, woke mandate.
I was telling Anthony and Desmond in here yesterday, Anthony Fox, Desmond Barney, that I don't know if they had necessarily seen it through this lens, but I was talking about the timeline of their indictments being in August of 2020. I said it was the country had George Floyd fever. And I believe that's a big part of the DEI push. It was, and a lot of that was post George Floyd. It was, everything was very race driven, very DEI, CRT driven. And I said, everybody wanted, every mayor in a Democrat municipality, they wanted their own George Floyd because they saw the money that came in. They saw the national notoriety that came in for the politicians, the preachers, the pulpit pimps, and just everybody involved. And I think a switch flipped. And they're like, you know what, that may have been what happened. I said, well, it played a part in it for sure. And we don't need any more of that.
I think one of the unsung heroes in that such a sad debacle of those prosecutions of Barney and Fox and Lampton, was one of the unsung heroes was Judge Faye Peterson. She dismissed that case against Barney and Lampton. I mean, she saw exactly what was going on, what the DA was trying to do, and said, this is nonsense. The evidence is not there. You do not have this. But for the Hinds County Circuit Clerk's office separating those three, putting two in Faye Peterson's court and putting one in Andrea Wooten's court, but for that, Anthony Fox would have never served a day in prison. And to this day, I still don't understand why that happened. I would love to know behind the scenes how you separate three individuals who were indicted for the same thing, but you put two in one before one judge and one before another judge. And the second judge is the one that you mentioned taking advantage of the timing of that and trying to implement what she thought was the spirit of America at the time with the murder of George Floyd.
Well, I think it was her and her immediate involvement with the attorney representing the family on the lawsuit.
Right.
I think there was a lot. I think it was a big. They were going to get a big payday, and that's just my opinion. I think the timeline and the evidence.
Her former employee. Former employer.
Yeah. And sponsor.
And
a few other things. So
campaign contributor.
Yeah, so very, very interesting stuff. Well, let's take a break. I was going to get Mike to tell some stories, but I thought that was such a great question about minority participation in the GOP that I wanted Mike to have a chance to answer that. So we'll punt the good stories to the next visit. Let's come back, land the plane with Mike, and we'll get ready for hour 2 here on the Clay Edwards Show. Welcome back in to the Clay Edwards Show, here with Mike Hurst as we land the plane on the first hour. Mike is, of course, the chairman of the Mississippi Republican Party. Guys, I just want to bring up a real point here. The reason for Mike coming on today, more so than anything, was just to remind you guys to get out and vote. We got a chance to flip a seat in this Mississippi Supreme Court and get send Jim Kitchens on into retirement and get Jennifer Branning in there for at least the next 8 years, hopefully till she's 81 years old. I don't know. But with that said, guys, here's a dirty little secret here. Did you know that if something were to happen to the Chief Justice, and rumors he ain't in the best health, Jim Kitchens would end up becoming, you'd have a Democrat Chief Justice in Mississippi if anything was to happen to the current Chief Justice. What's his name?
Mike Randolph.
Mike Randolph. Yeah. So let's just keep that in mind. We do not need that. I mean, you needed a little bit more motivation to get out today and vote in this special election. Please get out and do that. And look, this is me talking here, nobody else. You also have the Rankin County Judge position open there. I voted for Josh McCrory. Vote for whoever you want to, but don't forget to vote for the down ballot too on any other special elections that may be on the ballots throughout the state. So
we've got a Mississippi Court of Appeals race down on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. But one last thing on this Jim Kitchens Jennifer Branning race. This is so important, and especially for your listeners and the people that that I agree with. Right now, there's a case winding its way through the Mississippi court system. And the case basically is by a number of pro-life doctors, and they're basically asking the courts to say that the state constitution does not guarantee a right to abortion. That's still an outstanding question. Despite what Dobbs and overturning Roe v. Wade, there's still an outstanding question as to whether the state of Mississippi's constitution guarantees Mississippians a right to abortion. And that's going to end up at the Mississippi Supreme Court. And I can tell you, Jim Kitchens is going to say yes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, Jennifer Branning is going to say no. And that's why this is so important. It is going to decide literally the life and death of the next generation of Mississippians.
All right, guys. Do you need more? Do you need more than that?
Get out and vote.
Get out and vote. Look, we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who fought for so many of us to have this right. Do not take it for granted in this modern era where we haven't really had to fight for anything in a long time. Get out there and vote like your life depends on it, like your grandchildren's life depends on it. Mike Hurst, thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, Clay.
I'll be right back in 7 minutes with Chad Wesley and Jason Turner talking a little Mississippi music here on the Clay Edwards Show.